The first sign that something was wrong came at midnight. A sudden flare of light rippled across the night sky, casting an eerie glow over the earth. At first, people thought it was a meteor shower, a spectacular but harmless celestial event. But then, the power grid failed, and the sky turned an unnatural shade of violet. Earth's satellites blinked out one by one, and every communication system on the planet went dark. For the first time in human history, the entire world was without connection to the outside cosmos. Lyra stood in front of a large window in her university lab, staring at the fractured sky above. She had been studying the behavior of cosmic phenomena for years, but nothing like this had ever been recorded. The lights from the city below flickered like 1,000 dying stars. Panic began to rise among the population as military forces scrambled to find answers. Lyra, however, remained calm, her mind working furiously to unravel the puzzle before her. "It's not a meteor storm," she muttered to herself, analyzing the patterns in the sky. "The distortions are too precise. This is something different." Her fingers flew over the keyboard, activating her deep space communication systems in a desperate attempt to get in contact with any satellites still operational. But the screens remained blank, mocking her attempts. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the strange light began to coalesce into something more tangible. A massive, colossal shape, like a dark star that bled shadow, materialized in Earth's orbit. It was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. No ship, no craft, no weapon. It was as though a tear had been opened in space itself, and from it, something ancient and incomprehensible emerged. The shape shifted, pulsing with an energy that seemed to resonate with the very atoms of the atmosphere. Lyra's heart raced. It was not just a ship, it was an entity. The next morning, Earth's leaders convened an emergency meeting. The UN Assembly, military commanders, and intelligence officers all gathered in the heart of Geneva, but the sense of urgency was palpable. The world had gone silent. Radio broadcasts, internet communications, and satellites had all failed in the wake of the celestial anomaly. The city outside the window was eerily quiet, the usual buzz of activity now replaced by hushed whispers and frantic strategizing. "We don't know what this is," General Rhodes said, his voice tense. "But we know one thing for certain. It's not a natural phenomenon. It's a threat." Lyra stood at the back of the room, observing the proceedings. Her fingers were still numb from the shock of the night before. She had seen this kind of event in her research, massive, space-bending anomalies that defied the laws of physics. But this felt different. The Voidborn were not like any species humanity had ever encountered. There was an intelligence behind their actions, a purpose that transcended mere survival or conquest. "I've been monitoring its movements," she said, stepping forward. All eyes turned to her as she continued. "It's not just hovering, it's manipulating the very fabric of space. I can't explain how, but I believe they're trying to communicate." Rhodes narrowed his eyes. "Communicate with us?" "Yes," Lyra said, her voice unwavering. "I don't think they're here to destroy us, but I don't know what they want. What I do know is that they've been waiting for this moment, for humanity to be at its breaking point." The room fell silent. "Breaking point?" Rhodes repeated. Lyra nodded. "You see, these distortions, they're not random. They're signaling a new era, a shift. I believe humanity is being tested. The Voidborn, whatever they are, will judge us. But why and how, that's still unclear." She turned back to the sky outside. The darkness was growing, its presence a subtle, insidious thing that made the very air feel thick with impending change. Then the message arrived. It wasn't a transmission. It wasn't a radio signal or a cry for help. Instead, it was a single thought, transmitted to every human mind on Earth at once, as if carried on the very breeze that stirred the trees. A voice, deep, ancient, and echoing through the corners of existence, spoke directly into Lyra's mind. "Join us or face oblivion." Lyra staggered back, her heart pounding in her chest. The others in the room seemed oblivious to the sudden intrusion, lost in their own frantic debates. But Lyra knew the Voidborn had arrived, and their judgment had already begun. She glanced back at the sky, now darker than ever, as the silence of the cosmos seemed to press in around her. Lyra sat at her desk, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the fragmented data on her screen. The world was on the edge of collapse. Every communication network had been shut down. Every satellite that could have potentially offered answers had gone dark. Yet, somehow, she had connected to something deeper. It was a trace signal buried beneath layers of static and interference. As she pieced together the data, her mind flashed back to her recent research on ancient artifacts, long thought to be the remnants of humanity's forgotten history. There were legends, whispers among historians, that suggested humanity once possessed technology beyond its understanding, artifacts of great power, scattered across the earth after an event lost to time. Her curiosity had always drawn her to these stories, but this was different. The signal that had somehow penetrated the void wasn't just alien. It was human, or at least it once had been. With a grim determination, Lyra followed the signal's trail, moving swiftly through the darkened corridors of the university complex, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The building had once been a hub of knowledge, but now it felt like a mausoleum, empty, abandoned. Only she seemed to have the answers. The rest of the world was in chaos, trying to figure out what the Voidborn wanted, what they had meant by their cryptic message. But Lyra knew that understanding the signal might hold the key to something far greater than mere survival. She arrived at the university's underground vault, a place long forgotten by the public, its existence a secret even among scholars. She had discovered this location years ago during a routine excavation for rare artifacts, but had never dared to explore it. Now, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, there was no time for hesitation. The door, heavy and ancient, groaned as she pried it open. Inside, on a pedestal bathed in an eerie, pale light, lay the artifact. It was unlike anything she had seen before, a dark, crystalline structure, shimmering with an inner light that seemed to dance and shift. It pulsed with an unnatural energy, as though alive, as though aware of her presence. Lyra felt a sudden rush of heat, followed by a cold chill that gripped her bones. She approached cautiously, drawn to the object against her better judgment. Her fingers brushed the surface of the crystal, and a surge of energy shot through her. She gasped, stumbling back, her heart racing. Images, visions, flooded her mind. Endless stars, alien landscapes, celestial beings bathed in cosmic fire. At the center of it all was a single towering figure, a being of pure energy, reaching out to her across the vast expanse of time and space. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Lyra breathless and shaken. She clutched the artifact in her hands, realizing with a jolt that it wasn't just a relic. It was a key, one that could unlock untold potential within her and, perhaps, humanity itself. The Voidborn hadn't come to conquer, they had come to test humanity. The artifact, she now understood, was their offering, an invitation to ascend, to evolve beyond mortal limitations. But something felt wrong. The visions hadn't just been an invitation, they were a warning. She wasn't the first to discover this power. The artifact was connected to the Voidborn in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. It was both a tool and a weapon. And there were others who knew of its existence, who had been waiting for this moment. Before she could process the enormity of what she had discovered, the building shook violently, the ground trembling beneath her feet. The lights flickered, and a low, resonant hum vibrated through the walls. She knew immediately what it was. The Voidborn were here, and they were coming for the artifact. In the distance, she heard the unmistakable sound of boots marching on the concrete. A group of soldiers equipped with advanced technology had found her. But these were not ordinary soldiers. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their movements were unnatural mechanical. They were the first wave of the Voidborn's human collaborators, those who had already begun to embrace the promise of Ascension, forsaking their former lives for the power that the Voidborn offered. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she grasped the artifact tighter, the weight of its power becoming more overwhelming with each passing second. She didn't know what the Voidborn wanted with it, or how they had known of her discovery, but she knew one thing for certain: they were not going to let her keep it. With no time to lose, she turned and fled into the depths of the underground complex. The soldiers were close now, their presence unmistakable. As Lyra sprinted through the narrow corridors, her mind raced. The artifact was not just a key to her survival, it was the key to humanity's future. And she would protect it at all costs, even if it meant confronting the Voidborn themselves. The final battle for humanity's future had already begun, and Lyra was about to find herself at the heart of it. Lyra sprinted through the dark, labyrinthine halls of the university's underground complex, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. The rhythmic sound of heavy boots pounding the concrete floor echoed behind her, growing louder with each passing moment. She dared not look back. The soldiers were closing in, relentless and unyielding, their eerie, glowing eyes reflecting a cold, otherworldly intelligence. They were not human anymore, not entirely. They had already embraced the Voidborn's promise of Ascension, merging their minds with an alien consciousness, becoming part of a collective force far greater than any individual. The artifact clutched tightly in her hands. Lyra could feel the hum of energy coursing through it, pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. It was calling to her, urging her to tap into its vast power. But she resisted. This wasn't the time to explore its secrets. Survival was her priority now. She ducked into a narrow side passage, her heart pounding in her chest. The soldiers' footsteps echoed in the distance, their movements unnervingly synchronized, as if guided by an invisible force. The air around her was thick with tension. Lyra knew they wouldn't stop hunting her until they had the artifact in their hands. But there was something else, something deeper, more insidious about the Voidborn's presence. The whispers were growing louder now, faint but unmistakable. At first, she had dismissed them as nothing more than the stress of the situation, the adrenaline coursing through her veins, the exhaustion of the chase. But now, she realized they weren't just in her head. These weren't her thoughts. They were the Voidborn's. The collective mind they had forged was reaching out to her, probing her thoughts, searching for a way to bend her will. The whispers were not invasive, at least, not yet, but they were persuasive, like a distant voice calling her to something greater. Join us, become one with us, embrace the future. Lyra clenched her jaw, shaking her head to clear the intrusive thoughts. She couldn't afford to lose herself in them. Not now. But as she rounded a corner, she stumbled to a halt. In front of her, a door, a massive ancient structure of metal and stone, loomed. She hadn't noticed it before, but now, as though guided by some unseen force, she knew it was the only way out. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, to escape the pursuit, but she couldn't. Not when the artifact was so close to unlocking its true power. She placed her hand against the door's surface, and the hum of the artifact seemed to resonate with it, as if calling to something deeper within the stone. The door slid open with a low mechanical hiss, revealing a hidden chamber bathed in an eerie, otherworldly glow. The room was vast, the walls lined with symbols and carvings, strange, ancient inscriptions that Lyra didn't recognize. The air felt thick, charged with an almost tangible energy. As she stepped inside, she was hit by a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion: fear, awe, longing. It was as though the room itself was alive, aware of her presence. And then she saw it. At the center of the chamber, on a raised platform, was a figure. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a humanoid shape, tall and imposing, but with no distinct features. It shimmered, as though it were made of the very fabric of space itself, its form constantly shifting and warping. For a moment, Lara thought she saw a pair of glowing eyes, but they were gone before she could be sure. The artifact in her hands pulsed more strongly now, and she could feel the pull, the undeniable call to come closer. She approached the figure cautiously, unsure whether this was a trap or a revelation. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the chamber. It wasn't spoken aloud, but rather transmitted directly into her mind. "You are the one who has unlocked the path, human. The others will come, you will join us, or you will resist. The choice is yours." Lyra's heart raced. She had heard these words before, the whispering, the promise. The Voidborn were not just conquerors. They were architects of ascension. They weren't offering death. They were offering transformation. Transformation, she thought, her mind spinning. Is that what they want? To change us into something else? The figure's form shifted again, its shape rippling like a mirage. "The path to ascension is not an easy one," the voice continued. "It requires sacrifice. You must leave behind the limitations of flesh and become part of the collective. We are the Voidborn. We are the future." The room grew colder, the whispers growing more insistent, more demanding. It was then that Lyra realized what was truly at stake. The Voidborn weren't just offering power, they were offering something far more dangerous. They wanted to consume human identity, to erase it in favor of something new, something greater. They wanted to merge humanity with the Voidborn's collective consciousness, to extinguish free will and individuality. But Lyra wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. "I don't know what you are offering," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling in her mind. "But I know this isn't the way forward for humanity. We don't need to lose who we are to evolve." The figure before her paused, its shifting form stilling for a moment. For a brief second, Lara saw a flicker of something, maybe disappointment, maybe curiosity, in the depths of its formless face. "Then you will resist. You will fight against the inevitable. But know this, the choice is not yours alone." The whispers grew louder. The Voidborn were coming, and they were closer than ever before. Lyra's mind raced as the Voidborn's voice echoed in her head, its words more insistent than before. The chamber around her seemed to shift and distort, the walls vibrating with an almost physical pressure. The figure before her was not just a messenger, it was a manifestation of the Voidborn's power, and Lyra could feel the weight of their collective will bearing down on her. Every instinct told her to flee, to escape this suffocating presence, but she refused to back down. The whispers filled her mind again, a chorus of alien voices, soothing yet terrifying in their unison. "Join us. It is inevitable. Embrace the power that awaits. Your world is on the edge of oblivion. There is no salvation without us." But Lyra steeled herself. She had felt their pull, their desire to consume everything that made humanity unique. She wasn't just fighting for her own survival. She was fighting for the survival of humanity's soul. Her fingers tightened around the artifact, the pulse of energy inside it intensifying with each passing moment. It was a key that could either lead to the Voidborn's ascension or to humanity's freedom. "No," she thought, a defiant fire igniting within her. "I won't give in." In that instant, the ground beneath her feet trembled. The figure in front of her shifted once more, its form blurring and reassembling in a display of raw power. The lights in the chamber flickered as a wave of energy radiated outward, forcing Lyra to her knees. The figure spoke again, its voice cold, heavy with finality. "You resist, but it is futile. Humanity is weak. You are weak. You will bow to the inevitable." Lyra's thoughts were swirling, but one thing was clear, she couldn't do this alone. She had to find a way to awaken the power of the artifact, to unlock its true potential and resist the Voidborn's call. But how? She had no answers, only a desperate instinct that urged her to push forward. Suddenly, a distant sound reached her ears, the faint hum of machinery, of gears turning in motion. Lyra's heart leaped as the realization hit her. The artifact, it wasn't just an object. It was a device, a catalyst for something much more profound. The key wasn't just unlocking its power, it was about using it to reverse the Voidborn's influence, to sever their connection to the collective mind they sought to impose on humanity. The moment of clarity was fleeting, but it was enough. Lara stood up, her legs shaky but resolute, and gripped the artifact tightly in her hands. The figure in front of her flared with a brilliant burst of light, its formless shape twisting violently, like a star in the process of collapsing in on itself. The air thickened, and then, with a force that rattled the very bones of the chamber, a blinding wave of energy shot out from the artifact. The Voidborn's presence recoiled, as if in shock, the whispers faltering for a split second. Lara stumbled back as the wave of power slammed into the figure, sending it tumbling backward. For a moment, the chamber was silent, eerily so. The oppressive weight of the Voidborn's influence seemed to lift, if only for a breath. Then, in a sudden explosion of light, the figure reformed, more solid, more angry. It was not retreating, it was adapting, learning from Lyra's resistance. Its voice now crackled with anger and urgency. "You cannot win, human. You will be consumed, as all others have been. The path has already been set. Your world will be ours. Your people will be ours. All will serve the Voidborn." Lyra felt the weight of its words, but her resolve hardened. The artifact was still in her hands, still humming with energy, and she had just glimpsed its power. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a force of change, a force that could sever the Voidborn's control and reforge humanity into something stronger, more unified. But there was one more crucial piece missing. The world couldn't just depend on one person. Lara couldn't face the Voidborn alone, not with their collective power. She needed allies, those who still held onto the spark of humanity, those who would fight for their freedom, no matter the cost. She glanced back toward the door. The path to the surface, to the world outside, was still open. Time was running out. If the Voidborn's influence was already spreading, it wouldn't be long before they had complete control over Earth's population, turning them into their willing servants. Lara needed to warn the world. She needed to find the resistance, if one even existed. With a new sense of purpose, she turned away from the figure, clutching the artifact tightly as she fled the chamber. She had no idea where to begin, no clear plan beyond finding others like her, those who would stand against the Voidborn, those who could help her unlock the true potential of the artifact. As she ascended back toward the surface, the whispers of the Voidborn followed her, now fading into the distance, but Lara knew they would never truly leave her. The path forward would be treacherous. There would be betrayal, there would be sacrifice, but humanity's future had already been set into motion. And no force in the universe would stop her from protecting it. Lara's footsteps echoed through the darkened streets as she moved swiftly through the city, her mind focused on one singular task, finding the resistance. The Voidborn were here, and they had already infiltrated humanity's most vulnerable points. She knew there were pockets of resistance, groups that had been forming for years, hidden in the shadows, preparing for something like this. But where were they? Who could she trust? Her thoughts raced as she navigated through the abandoned urban landscape. The city, once a thriving hub of civilization, now lay in ruins, its lights dimmed, its streets empty. Signs of the Voidborn's arrival were everywhere. Strange alien markings scrawled across buildings, a pervasive sense of stillness in the air, as though the city was holding its breath. She had heard rumors of resistance cells operating in secret, but she had no direct connections. She was alone, armed with only the artifact and the fragile knowledge she had gathered. She had to act quickly. The Voidborn's influence was growing every minute. Their network was vast, and their control was insidious. They could be anywhere, human collaborators who had already succumbed to the promise of Ascension, or worse, the Voidborn themselves, walking among the human population in disguise. Lara knew the risks, but she had no choice. The artifact in her hands was her best chance at stopping them. But it was more than just a tool, it was a symbol. a beacon for those still willing to fight for humanity's future. As she turned a corner, she froze. There, in the dim light, a group of figures emerged from the shadows. Their movements were deliberate, quiet, as if they had been waiting for her. At first glance, they seemed like ordinary people, human, but something about them felt off. There was a coldness in their eyes, a weariness that spoke of long struggles. They were armed, but not with standard weapons. Instead, they carried strange, alien technology, tools that Lyra recognized as being of Voidborn origin. One of them, a tall man with dark hair and piercing eyes, stepped forward. "Lara Solis," he said, his voice low and measured. "We've been expecting you." Lara tensed, her heart pounding. These people were not part of the Voidborn's immediate assault, but they were clearly not ordinary humans either. She reached for the artifact, ready to defend herself, but the man's voice halted her. "We're not here to fight you, Lyra. We're here to help." He gestured to the others behind him, and they slowly lowered their weapons. "We're the resistance, the true resistance." Lyra narrowed her eyes, unsure whether to trust them. There was no way of knowing who they really were. The Voidborn had infiltrated so many systems, so many lives, it was impossible to tell who had already fallen under their influence. "How do you know who I am?" she asked, still wary. "We've been watching you," the man replied. "We know about the artifact. We know about what you're carrying, and we know you're the one who can unlock its true potential." Lyra's grip on the artifact tightened, her thoughts swirling. "You're telling me you want to help me, but you know about the Voidborn? You know what they want." The man nodded solemnly. "We know, and we've been preparing for this day for years. We've been tracking their movements, monitoring the signs of their ascension. We knew someone like you would come along, someone with the courage to stand against them." Lyra felt a flicker of hope. Could this be what she had been searching for? A real resistance, a group that had been fighting the Voidborn from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to act. "We can't stop them alone," the man continued. "But together, we might have a chance." Lyra studied him for a moment, then glanced at the others, who stood silently watching her, their expressions unreadable. There was something about them, something that suggested they had been through unimaginable trials, that they had already lost much in their struggle. She let out a breath and finally nodded. "All right, I'll trust you for now." The man's face softened, and he gestured for her to follow them. "We've set up a base of operations in the heart of the city. We've been gathering survivors, people who still want to fight. There are more of us than you think." As they moved through the city, Lyra began to feel a renewed sense of purpose. The resistance, though small and fractured, was stronger than she had imagined. These were people who had been quietly building their strength, waiting for the right time to strike back. But the time for waiting was over. The Voidborn were already here, and the battle for humanity's future had begun. As they reached a hidden entrance in a dilapidated building, the man turned to her again. "We have something to show you, something that might help us understand the true nature of the Voidborn and how we can fight back." Lyra's heart raced with anticipation. She had no idea what they had found, but whatever it was, it could be the key to turning the tide. They descended into the darkened underground, the air thick with the scent of dust and old machinery. The deeper they went, the more it felt as though they were descending into the very heart of humanity's last stand. As they reached the Resistance's hidden base, Lyra saw the faces of those who had joined the fight, men, women, and children, each marked by their determination and desperation. They were survivors, not just of the Voidborn's onslaught, but of humanity's own fractured existence. In the midst of them all stood a massive holographic map, showing the global spread of the Voidborn's influence. Lyra's heart sank as she saw the darkening zones across the map. The Voidborn were everywhere, spreading faster than they could react. But then, the man stepped forward and activated a terminal. "This is why you're here, Lyra. This is the key to understanding the Voidborn." The screen flickered to life, revealing a series of ancient data files hidden away for centuries. Lyra's eyes widened as the first image came into view, a diagram of the very artifact she held in her hands. "This," the man said, "is how we fight them. This is the beginning of our counterattack." The map on the screen flickered again, and Lyra's eyes locked onto the data files that now filled the terminal. The diagrams, once obscure and indecipherable, slowly began to take form in her mind. It was as if the artifacts, the very object she carried in her hands, were not just weapons, but keys to a deeper understanding of the Voidborn. The man at her side, whom she now knew as Dorian, spoke softly. "This is the culmination of years of research. What we've learned is not just about fighting the Voidborn, it's about understanding them. The artifact you have, it's more than a tool. It's part of something much larger, something older than humanity itself." Lyra frowned, her grip tightening on the artifact. "Older than humanity? What do you mean?" Dorian's eyes met hers, his expression grim. "The Voidborn weren't born from this galaxy, Lyra. They didn't just evolve. They were created, a species engineered by something far more ancient, far more powerful. This artifact, it's one of many scattered across the galaxy. They were designed to stop the Voidborn's ascension, to block their collective consciousness from consuming everything." Lyra's pulse quickened. This was bigger than she'd imagined. The Voidborn were not a natural force, they were engineered, a weapon created by an unknown race. She glanced back at the map, which showed growing zones of Voidborn influence, zones that were quickly expanding. "We've been gathering all the data we can on their origins," Dorian continued, his voice low but urgent. "The Resistance has unearthed fragments of ancient technologies, texts that speak of a race known as the Architects. They were creators of many things, Lyra, including the Voidborn. But they were also the ones who built the artifacts, each one a key to stopping them." "Are these architects still around?" Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper. The implications of Dorian's words were staggering. Were there other species out there who could stand against the Voidborn? Could they help? Dorian shook his head, his jaw tightening. "We don't know. What we do know is that the Voidborn are following the path laid out by their creators, and they're getting closer to their goal. If they succeed, the galaxy will fall. Humanity will be nothing more than an afterthought, absorbed into their collective mind." The weight of his words hung in the air. For all her desperation, for all her hope, Lyra understood the gravity of the situation. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for everything that made humanity what it was: free, independent, and individual. But the Voidborn didn't see humanity as individuals. They saw them as a means to an end, pieces to be consumed and absorbed into something far greater. "But why me?" Lyra's voice trembled. "Why did the artifact choose me? Why was I the one who unlocked it?" Dorian looked at her with an intensity that made her shiver. The artifacts weren't meant to be found by just anyone. They were designed to respond to a specific kind of mind, a specific kind of humanity. The architects believed that in the moment of greatest need, someone with the strength to resist the Voidborn's collective consciousness would emerge. And that person, you, Lyra, would be able to unlock the full potential of the artifacts. She stared at the artifact in her hands, the faint pulse of energy still humming through it. She could feel it now more than ever, as if the device was alive, calling to her, urging her to understand. Dorian's voice broke through her thoughts. "The artifact is part of something more. It's a conduit, a channel to an ancient power that can sever the Voidborn's collective will. But it's not just about wielding power, it's about control. You're the key to bringing humanity together, to resisting the Voidborn's unity, but you need to understand how to use it." Lyra glanced at the map again, studying the darkening regions. If what Dorian said was true, the Voidborn's ascension was not just a battle of strength, it was a war of wills, a struggle for the very soul of humanity. "There has to be a way to stop them." Lyra said, her voice firm, more certain now than it had ever been. If this artifact is the key, then we can use it to break their connection. We can sever their collective mind. Dorian gave her a small, bitter smile. That's the plan, but it won't be easy. The artifact you have, it's only one piece of a much larger puzzle. There are others, hidden across the world, across the galaxy. Together, they form a map, a blueprint for resistance. If we can find the others, we can combine their power, unlock the full potential of the artifacts, and stop the Voidborn's ascension. The gravity of the task ahead settled over Lyra like a weight. Finding the other artifacts, unlocking their secrets, this wasn't just a mission. It was a journey into the heart of the Voidborn's empire, into the depths of an ancient war that spanned the cosmos. But she couldn't do it alone, not anymore. The Resistance, with its knowledge, its resources, its strength, was her only hope. "We'll need to move fast," she said, her voice determined. "If we don't act soon, they'll have the entire planet under their control." Dorian nodded. "We've already begun gathering forces. We'll take you to our safe house, where we have more information. But we'll have to keep moving. The Voidborn are hunting us." Lyra glanced once more at the artifact, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just fighting for humanity's survival, she was fighting for its future. And she would do whatever it took to make sure it wasn't swallowed by the Voidborn's endless collective mind. The journey to the Resistance's safe house was swift, but Lyra felt the weight of every passing second. The Voidborn's reach was expanding, and every moment spent away from the fight felt like an eternity. Dorian led her through a labyrinth of abandoned tunnels, their walls echoing with the faint hum of old machinery, remnants of the city's forgotten past. The air was thick with the scent of rust and decay, but to Lyra, it felt like the last vestige of humanity's resilience. When they arrived at the safe house, it wasn't what Lyra had imagined. It wasn't an underground bunker or a fortified compound. Instead, it was a room filled with flickering holographic screens, cluttered terminals, and rows of makeshift workstations. The walls were lined with ancient relics, old books, data cubes, and artifacts that looked like they belonged to another age, another civilization. "This is where we've been collecting our intel," Dorian said, leading her toward a central table, covered in maps and documents. "We've been tracking Voidborn movements across the globe, trying to piece together their strategy. But we need something more, something that can give us the edge." Lyra scanned the room, taking in the faces of those gathered. They weren't soldiers, not in the traditional sense. These were scientists, hackers, engineers, and survivors, people who had lost everything but refused to let the Voidborn's cold, consuming power take away their will to fight. There was a palpable sense of unity among them, as if they had already made their peace with the sacrifices to come. A woman with short-cropped hair and a stern expression approached Lyra. "I'm Kiera," she said, extending her hand. "Dorian's told us about the artifact. If what you're carrying is what we think it is, it's more important than you can imagine." Lyra nodded, still clutching the artifact tightly. "What's the next step? How do we stop the Voidborn?" Kiera's gaze hardened, and she gestured to the map laid out before them. The Voidborn aren't just on the attack. They're trying to consolidate their power by tapping into ancient energy sources, sources that were once sealed away, hidden from the universe. "We've located one of their key sites. It's a nexus, an energy conduit built by the architects. If they control it, they'll be able to transmit their collective consciousness across entire star systems." Lyra's stomach dropped. "You're telling me they found a way to broadcast their will? To spread their influence across the galaxy?" Kiera nodded grimly. "Exactly. And it's not just a matter of stopping them here on Earth. If they succeed, they could bring down every civilization they come into contact with. We're talking about galactic-scale domination." Lyra felt a chill crawl up her spine. This wasn't just the survival of Earth at stake. The Voidborn's ascension would be the end of everything humanity had ever known. an extinction not of bodies, but of individuality itself. To be absorbed into the Voidborn collective would be to lose the essence of being human. But how do we stop them? Lyra repeated, her voice tight with urgency. We have to hit them where it hurts, Kira said. The Nexus is the key. If we can destroy it, sever their connection to the collective mind they're trying to form, it could set them back centuries. It won't be easy. They've reinforced the site with layers of security, both physical and metaphysical. Dorian spoke up, his voice tinged with an unsettling calm. And that's where the artifact comes in. The Nexus site is protected by a barrier, a force field of sorts, that's impervious to most conventional weapons. But the artifact you're carrying is tied to the Architect's technology. It can interface with their constructs, disrupt their systems, and break through their defenses. Lyra's eyes widened. You're saying it can disable the Nexus? Dorian nodded. Yes, but it won't be enough to just have the artifact. You'll need to focus your will. The artifact can't act on its own. It needs you, your mind, your intent. You'll have to connect with the energy of the Nexus, understand its flow, and sever it from the Voidborn's control. Lyra's heart raced. It sounded impossible. She wasn't a warrior, not a hero in the traditional sense. She was just one woman, carrying an artifact that was both a weapon and a mystery. She wasn't sure she had the strength or the skill to wield it as Dorian described. But one thing was clear, the Voidborn had to be stopped. If not by her, then who? We can help, Kira said, as if reading her thoughts. We'll support you, but you'll have to lead the charge. You're the one who can unlock the artifact's true potential. Lyra swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. Then let's move. We don't have much time. Dorian led them to a shuttle, a small, armed vehicle equipped for rapid deployment, and they set off toward the coordinates of the Nexus. As they traveled, Lyra couldn't shake the weight of the responsibility now resting on her shoulders. The Resistance was relying on her. Humanity was relying on her. She stared out of the shuttle's window, watching the barren landscape rush by. The world outside had fallen into the Voidborn's grip, but there was still a chance to fight back. Still a chance to free humanity from their collective enslavement. As they neared the target site, Lyra could feel the energy of the artifact pulsing, as though it recognized the proximity to the Nexus. The artifact wasn't just a key, it was a guide, a channel for something far greater than any one person. And as they approached the heart of the Voidborn's power, Lyra knew that the final test was about to begin. She took a deep breath, bracing herself. This was it, the moment when everything would either fall apart, or the galaxy would be given a chance to breathe free once more. The shuttle touched down a safe distance from the Nexus, its engines humming to a halt. Lyra stepped out onto the cracked earth, the landscape before her dominated by a towering structure pulsing with otherworldly energy. The Nexus loomed like a monument to the Voidborn's power, its jagged spires piercing the sky, surrounded by a shimmering force field that seemed to hum with an ominous life of its own. The air was thick with tension. Around her, Resistance fighters prepared their weapons, their faces set with grim determination. Dorian and Kira stood at her side, their gazes fixed on the Nexus. Lyra clutched the artifact tightly, its pulse growing stronger as they drew closer. This is it, Dorian said, his voice low. The Nexus is the center of their operation. If we destroy it, we cripple their ability to broadcast their consciousness, and we buy humanity time to regroup. Kira handed Lyra a small device. This will help you interface with the artifact once you're inside. It'll amplify its signal, but you'll need to get to the core of the Nexus to use it. That's where their connection is strongest. Lyra nodded, swallowing her fear. What about the Voidborn? They won't just let us walk in. They'll come, Dorian said grimly. They'll defend this place with everything they have. That's why we're here, to hold them off while you do what needs to be done. Lyra looked at the gathered fighters, each one ready to sacrifice themselves for the chance to stop the Voidborn. It was humbling, terrifying and inspiring all at once. She wasn't alone in this fight, not anymore. "We're ready," she said, her voice steady. "Let's move." The Resistance launched their attack, opening with a barrage of explosive charges to weaken the Nexus' outer defenses. The Voidborn responded almost instantly. Their forms emerged from the shadows, imposing figures of cold, metallic perfection, their eyes glowing with the eerie light of their collective mind. They moved with an inhuman precision, their weapons cutting through the Resistance's ranks like scythes through wheat. But the fighters held their ground, their determination unyielding. They weren't just battling the Voidborn, they were buying Lyra the time she needed. Lyra and Dorian sprinted toward the Nexus's outer perimeter, using the chaos of the battle as cover. The artifact in Lyra's hands seemed to guide her, its energy resonating with the strange barrier that surrounded the structure. As they reached the force field, the artifact pulsed brightly, and the barrier shimmered, then collapsed, granting them entry. Inside, the Nexus was a labyrinth of alien architecture, its walls alive with pulsating energy. The air vibrated with the hum of the Voidborn's presence. Lyra felt their influence pressing against her mind, whispering promises of unity, of power, of an end to all struggle. She clenched her teeth, forcing the voices away. She couldn't let them in. Not now. "Stay focused," Dorian urged, his weapon at the ready. "The core is up ahead." They pushed forward, navigating the maze-like corridors. Voidborn guardians appeared, their sleek forms blocking the path, but Dorian's precision and Lyra's determination saw them through. Each step brought them closer to the Nexus's heart and the source of its power. Finally, they reached the core, a massive chamber dominated by a swirling vortex of light and shadow, suspended within an intricate framework of alien machinery. The artifact in Lyra's hands blazed with energy, reacting to the core's presence. "This is it," Dorian said. "You know what to do." Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding. The core's energy was overwhelming, a raw, unfiltered connection to the Voidborn's collective consciousness. She could feel their presence, their vastness, a mind that spanned galaxies, cold and unrelenting. The artifact pulsed in her hands, its energy surging as she raised it toward the core. The device Kiera had given her interfaced seamlessly, amplifying the artifact's power. But it wasn't enough to simply activate it. Lyra had to channel her intent, to focus her will against the Voidborn's overwhelming presence. The whispers grew louder, the Voidborn's collective mind pressing against her thoughts. "You are one of us," they whispered. "Join us, end the suffering, become whole." "No," Lyra said aloud, her voice firm. "You don't understand what it means to be human. We're not just parts of a whole, we're individuals, and we won't be consumed." The artifact flared, its energy clashing with the core's light. The Voidborn's whispers turned to screams, a cacophony of rage and fear as Lyra's will pushed back against their collective mind. The chamber shook, the Nexus destabilizing as the artifact's power severed the Voidborn's connection. Outside, the battle raged on, but the Voidborn began to falter, their movements growing erratic. The Resistance fighters seized the moment, pressing their advantage. Inside the Nexus, Lyra focused all her energy, pouring her defiance into the artifact. The core trembled, then erupted in a brilliant flash of light. The Voidborn's influence shattered, their collective will severed. As the light faded, Lyra collapsed, the artifact dimming in her hands. Dorian rushed to her side, helping her to her feet. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "The connection is broken." Lyra nodded weakly, a small smile on her lips. They had won, but the fight was far from over. The Voidborn were weakened, but not defeated. Humanity had bought itself a chance to rebuild, to resist, and to reclaim its future. And Lyra would be there, standing at the forefront of the battle, ready to lead humanity into the next chapter of its fight for survival.